Nuclear fallout. You see it depicted in movies, you see it at the end of the world, in the video games, books, and even TV shows. Here, you can see that in these movies and books, you can see the negativity of going nuclear. Nuclear weapons, bombs, and meltdowns, they cause thousands and hundreds of lives and deaths. My advocate, Raven Santos, claims that nuclear energy will be the future of America's source of power. His claims are that other renewable resources are ineffective and inefficient. Nuclear power plants have the highest power to waste ratio, with being a small, semi-renewable energy resource. And his third claim is that present-day nuclear reactors are equipped with advanced safety systems and technology. So first, I want to go on his first claim about how comparing to nuclear energy, other renewable resources are inefficient. The World Energy Statistics shows a rise in the U.S. supply of solar and geothermal energy resources in the past couple of decades within the United States. And while nuclear energy has kind of stayed relatively constant rather than exponentially growing like solar. Nuclear reactors require a lot of land to be built on, and not only do they need land to be built on, but they also need somewhere for their waste to be kept. And their byproduct is more dangerous than what they're actually dealing with. And also, my advocate went off on alternative forms of renewable energy is impractical in their implementation and availability, along with them being inefficient. He stated that hydroelectric energy requires dams. They also create ways for cities to collect rainwater that would otherwise be sent to the ocean and then lost. Solar energy is a reasonably new source of energy that, with enough money and resources and more research, we can boost it and make solar the future. It's safe, clean, and it's not harmful to the environment nor anyone living around it. The creation of Solar Roadways, a company that has created a way to upgrade our roads and removing concrete it can create sustainable lighting, instant emergency alerts for crashes, landslides, or any other medical responses, and that doesn't harm the environment. It also isn't used like concrete, uses many processes that cause pollution, also uses paint, which is chemically induced with chemicals that seep into the water and will end up in our oceans. And with more money and resources, like I said, to help these innovative solar companies, then we will make solar more efficient and the ultimate future, not nuclear power. So then his second claim is that nuclear power has the highest power to waste ratio while being a semi-renewable energy source. So yes, so much power is created and generated off of these nuclear reactors, but the risk is just, it's not worth it. Waste may be low, but the waste has very high potential hazards. So the laws are more complicated, and storage for all reactors is different depending on the reactor, and most of them are kept on site rather than transported into a safe and disposable storage where it should be, so that it's not harmful for thousands of years, as its half-life is roughly about 500,000 years. So there was a nonprofit nuclear information and resource service that concluded in 2007 that a report that tons of radioactive waste were ending up in landfills and some consumer products thanks to a 2000 federal ban on recycling metal that had been exposed to radioactivity. So these laws, they're not set for all these reactors in the United States where we need to come, like, there's been talk about the Yucca Valley in Nevada, about building it in one of the mountains down below, but there's many that are still against it because of the fear of a leakage, or critics fear of a plan to also point out that various natural forces such as erosion and earthquakes could render the site unstable and thus unsuitable to store nuclear isotopes that can remain hazardous to humans for hundreds of thousands of years. And his last claim is that Present-day nuclear reactors are equipped with advanced safety systems and technology. And yes, a nuclear reactor can withstand a plane crash, but can it withstand a 9.0 earthquake, unexpected, no time to prepare, or can it withstand a hurricane, or many tornadoes or fires? And just evacuating the reactor can leave it vulnerable to other things. These reactors do have safety and protocols if an event of other situations, but this is due to high-level inspections that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of the United States, that they regulate this to make sure that these conditions are met. And on March 14th, the Press Herald published an article stating that the nuclear power industry is pushing for the NRC to cut back on inspections at nuclear power plants and throttle back what it tells the public about plant problems. Which that is a big problem, because if the government isn't interfering in the nuclear power plants, then they can cover up lies, create secrets of how much radiation is released, kind of like how they did in Chernobyl. So my advocate stated that Chernobyl was a careless and ill-experienced fault. But no, what it was it was a cover-up. It was many secrets and lies that many of these people that were in charge of the reactors were trying to hide, and they were dimming down the amounts of radiation that had leaked out of Chernobyl once before it actually lost one of its reactors. And when it did lose one of its reactors, it still was running until about 2000. So there's a Russian author, Alla Yarnsinskaya, who states that the levels of cesium-137 isotope alone were equal to 300 Hiroshimas. Around 10 million hectares of farmland were contaminated by cesium, which is roughly about 25 million acres. So, would 25 million acres be worth losing rather than a few hundred square feet of land contributed to solar energy? I don't think so. So the worry is that disaster could either damage, so the people have a right to fear the risk of nuclear energy. Without it, with the people covering it up and not allowing the people to have public information of this knowledge that they're at risk every day, no matter living within 10 miles of it or 50-mile radius of it, it will damage you if it melts down. So the conclusion is the future of America's source of power is not nuclear energy, but investing in an all-around safe and reliable source of energy, which is solar. This is still all relatively new, with government investments like this new Green Deal that the Democratic radicals are really trying to push through in Congress. Is a step in the right direction, and this step will keep us on the right track, and hopefully it'll put more money into these safe and clean energy resources and away from any more nuclear power plants being brought up. So the risks outweigh the pros of nuclear energy, when it comes to the citizens of the United States. Higher ratios are not worth the potential risk of thousands of lives when we have an efficient and safe alternative like solar. We have implemented solar panels onto roof tiles to save space, solar road tiles, and so many more innovative ways. We can put things, we don't just have to take up flat land, we can use mountain land, and also solar panels on buildings. So more money and research are needed to help prevent another disaster like Chernobyl and Fukushima. The people do not want to be living next to a future catastrophe. The day nuclear energy is non-nuclear is the day that America's source of power will become nuclear.
Right, well, structurally, things are pretty clear. I do think on the first point, when you talk about solar generated energy, that there's a lot of assertions there that don't demonstrate that it is able to provide a sufficient amount of energy. There's this whole proposal that we're going to put solar panels in the roads. There's no evidence that talks about how that would work, how efficient that would be. You mentioned hydroelectric energy. Just in passing, you don't really say anything about the argument. I think that that's a little bit confusing. And you say that there's been growth in the solar industry, but the nukes have remained relatively stable. I think that that's probably a pretty good argument, but I don't know that the growth is sufficient to meet the needs of the energy that is demanded to keep the economy going and that sort of thing. So we need a little bit more development on that. On the waste issue, on the second point, there's a lot of stuff that's asserted here that is, I think, problematic. The one piece of evidence that you provide here talks about waste that ended up in the landfills, but it's not from nuclear power plants, it's from metal recycling. So how that applies to the argument, I'm not quite sure. Then the discussion of storing waste underground, you've got a vague reference to the Yucca Valley project and why that's not going to work. I think you need more specific evidence on the waste issue to show us how this risk exists. I think you're relying a little bit on that scary story that you start with as our attention device to get us to feel a risk of nuclear power instead of developing an argument about what the actual risks are. The safety point on the third point all depends on hypotheticals. A 9.0 earthquake, for instance, you kind of then default to criticisms of Chernobyl and some of the issues that we're faced with there. I believe the advocate had some very specific responses about Chernobyl and why it's not really a thing that you ought to be reasoning from. And your answer seems to be mostly, like back up on that earlier point, well, there's a movement to reduce the oversight of the industry, and that would suggest that maybe there's no control that's going on. I think that's a big inferential leap that you're making if the nuclear industry says, hey, could we have a few less sites and could we not go overboard every time we have a minor problem and turn it into a major issue? You turn it into, the government's not going to look at this nuclear power safety issue anymore. I think that's a big leap that you're making on that particular point. The speech is 9 minutes, so it's 50% overtime. That's a lot of time. So I got to stop here because we have a lot.